What's going on, everyone? This is Alex Quin, and you're listening to the Hustle Inspires Hustle podcast. On today's episode, we are joined by Dan Ram. Dan is a six-time TEDx speaker, three-time entrepreneur, and the MC of global events like Web Summit and Davos. Welcome, Dan, to the podcast. What's going on?
Hey Alex, love to be here. I'm super excited for a conversation.
Yeah, man. Sounds like you've been busy lately. What's going on?
Busy always. I can't remember the last time I slept more than 8 hours, so I'm
Oh,
always hustling.
man. I wish sleep upon you this holiday season.
I was doing an interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he very famously said at the end of it, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And while I think there's something very unhealthy about that level of hustle, for me, for some reason, it resonates. So if you
Yeah.
need to sleep, sleep. But I'm just one of these people that loves life. I wake up jumping out of bed, excited to get going, and I'm grateful for every day.
Was there ever an era of your life where you didn't feel excited to wake up and get work done and you weren't like motivated?
I don't know about an era, but there have been moments for sure.
Yeah?
Moments of significant setback, of loss, of grief. I can think about moments even in my childhood of significant self-doubt. You know, when you don't make the team that you've been aiming for, when
Hmm.
the thing that you've been trying and trying and trying and it doesn't work. And it goes deeper than just, oh, I didn't make the team. It's more about self-worth and self-value. I've also had significant struggles around identity and who am I and where do I fit in and where do I belong? These are complex questions for a 14, 15, 16-year-old to deal with. And there have been days that have been tough to get out and face what feels like impossible challenges to overcome. But there have also been days that, and I might be your first speaker, that maybe has had as many near-death experiences. But there's something about almost losing your life that smacks you back into reality and makes you go, wait a second, this is a gift. However hard it gets, at least I'm alive. And
Wow.
so, six near-death experiences, I now don't have time to have bad days. I have moments and situations that cause me to feel bad, and then I have the realization that I'm alive. And as long as I'm alive, I've got to fight. As long as I've got to fight, I have a chance. So let's keep going.
Hey, man, and I think that that's all a testament to all the great work that you've been doing and how active you've been in being speaker. I think that, from an outside in perspective, just talking with you and learning a little bit about you and maybe without all those challenges, all those maybe difficult days, those six experiences, you wouldn't be a 6X TEDx speaker if perhaps you didn't have a six times near death experiences or any of those challenges that you talked about. You think that made a big difference in the way that you perceive life and how you communicate with others?
Absolutely. I think in a world that is so desperate to achieve and experience results now, I will say something. There are certain lessons that you can only learn in those dark seasons. There's a very famous preacher called T.D. Jakes, and he does a sermon and a talk where he talks about how seed is planted in the soil. It means it's planted in darkness. It means it is hidden. It is out of sight. But that is where growth happens. That's where that seed realizes his identity as a plant and eventually goes into a tree. And one of the things that I think the dangers of fame and platform and being known and personal brands is it doesn't really give us a chance to grow. And so I wish upon every listener hard times, and I wish upon every listener maybe even a near-death experience, not because of the feeling, but because of the growing that comes from it. And that growth, those lessons are super vital for unlocking whatever the next level is. You need a thick skin to be in this business, and you don't get a thick skin unless you've been bullied. You
Yeah.
need to know how to think creatively, and you don't learn how to think creatively until you're stuck in a rut. You need to know how to adapt, and you don't know how to adapt unless you're taken out of your comfort zone and thrown into other countries, other schools, other friend circles every 3 years of your life. These are not hypothetical situations. These are all parts of my own childhood story that have made me who I am today. And that's why I walk with the confidence I do, not because it was easy, but because I fought through.
So you grew up in 10 countries, four continents, is that correct?
10 countries. I'm now living in the 11th.
Talk to me about that. Break that down for me.
Dad is a retired diplomat for the Indian government, which
Nice.
means that every 3 years we got moved to another country. So I was born in Abu Dhabi, UAE, and immediately moved to Yemen. Then we were in France, where I started elementary school. Continued that through Algeria. Algeria was in the middle of a civil war, so we were only there for 1 year. Retreated to UAE, where I finished middle school, and actually UAE and India, where I finished middle school. Zimbabwe is where I started high school. It's also where my first near-death experience happened with a wild lion. And then I moved to Morocco,
Ooh, love
where
Morocco.
I finished high school.
Yeah.
And then I went to college. I went to Yale University in the US, although I've had this American accent for longer. And so I went to the US for the first time when I was 17 years old to go to college, spent 4 years there, moved to Indonesia, where I had my first job with the United Nations, and then moved to India on a bit of a soul-searching mission to see if it would be my home. And I also worked for World Vision. Realized India was not my home, felt really, really sad and disconnected from everybody. Moved to Ireland, where my dad was finishing his 30 years in the government. And while I was there, really just retreating to be with family, to find a safe space, I found my home. And for 8 years, I lived in Ireland. That's the longest I've lived anywhere. And then during the pandemic years, I split my time between Dubai and India, and now I live in Germany. So that's the shortest version of those 11 countries I can take you through.
Yeah, that's amazing. Did you find it challenging? Like each time you had to switch, was it exciting for you? How was that?
Incredibly challenging. I mean, you are ripped out of everything that is safe and known. As a child, that cocoon is super important. And so, especially when you add other elements. I'm an introvert, so making friends is very challenging. Just talking to people is very challenging.
Are you an
And
introvert?
I am an introvert, yes.
Wow. Okay.
So, as an introvert, it was difficult to make friends. As a very shy, often overweight, acne-faced child, I also just generally found it hard to connect with all the good-looking people in my class. I wasn't particularly athletic,
Yeah.
and I didn't really have a sense of humor or anything else. I didn't have much going for me, and therefore, when I did eventually make that one friend after maybe a year and a half of being in a school, I would then be on my way out and be saying goodbye to that friend. Also, this is dating me, but I grew up before the era of social media. So when I said bye to a friend, that meant I said bye. And may life somehow miraculously bring us back together, but there was no way to stay in touch. It's not like, all right, we'll stay in the DMs. Hey, we'll, send a message every. No, no, no. It was just like goodbye, see you,
Hmm.
and that was it. It also is very complicated from a cultural point of view. Some countries we were free to walk the streets because they're safe. Some countries were ridiculously dangerous. We couldn't leave the house without security. There were countries where we had big houses where we could uh, swim in our own pool and play tennis in our own tennis court. And then the very next country, you'd be in a small little apartment on the third floor, and everything that you kind of take as normal, you have to rethink and redefine and go, okay, actually, this can also be my bedroom, even if it's not as big as the other place. There were countries where I was more outdoors, countries I was more indoors. So in many ways, I was rebirthing in each place. And this topic of adaptability has now become the main subject of my PhD research because while for me, it happened as the son of an Indian diplomat, for everybody, you will have to adapt, whether it's technology, whether it's moving countries, whether it's a pandemic, whatever it is, we are going to have to adapt. And I think it's a superpower that for me was a gift from my parents, although out of very challenging circumstances. But I think for everybody, it's something that we got to learn how to adapt.
So how does a shy, perhaps introverted, perhaps a little bit overweight, acne Dan become a successful public speaker? Like, what was the catalyst there? Because based off how you describe it, you wouldn't think that you would potentially end up doing what you're doing, which requires you to be an extrovert, an entertainer, and a motivator. How was that?
Yeah, they say never judge a book by its cover. And I would say that's also true for ourselves. Don't judge yourself based on your past. Don't judge yourself based on what people say you are and what you're not. Give yourselves a chance to grow into stuff. For me, because it was my struggle, I put extra effort into it. So when I knew that the teacher was going to call on us to read a section of a book, any extrovert would have loved the show, would have loved the chance to be seen. Not me. I was petrified. So the night before, I would read the chapter just to make sure I wouldn't mispronounce any words, just to make sure I would sound not stupid or
Mm.
cringe, and I would practice. But practice is a beautiful, beautiful way of growing and learning. Remember, even in church, church is supposed to be a safe space. But man, having that mic in front of me, having my voice amplified through the rooms with all those adults listening and friends who would judge me, woo, that was really frightening. So what would I do? I'd practice. I would even practice the things that people don't practice, like how do you approach a microphone? Do you know how people come and go tap, tap, tap on a microphone? I hated that sound. So I thought to myself, how do you not do that? Or when people try to adjust a microphone and it make all those other sounds. So I would think about all those little details that most people didn't think about, only because it scared me, because I didn't want to be connected to things that were negative.
You don't want to be
But
awkward. Yeah.
but as a result of that, it just meant that I very quickly became much better than the ones who took it for granted, that just could do things on the fly. It just meant that they weren't growing. They were operating out of what they were good at. I was operating out of what I was weak at. And so just practice and practice. As an introvert, I'm also a keen observer. So I watch people and I saw, okay, right before they say a joke, what do they do? How do they get people's attention? What do they do with their body? What do they do with their shoulders? What about their face? And I would just imitate. I would practice that too. I
Nice.
spent a lot of time to this day watching late night show TV hosts, comedians, pastors, magicians, artists, and I keep watching the art of storytelling and I keep learning. So that's how that happened, is putting in the work, practicing, working at my deficit, working at what I was weak at. The public speaking career started later, but public speaking was sort of a necessity. If you're going to be a leader, whether it's the badminton team, which is such a dorky sport, but yeah, I was captain of the team, or whether it is playing in a band and having to convince the rest of the jazz musicians to go my way, this all takes communication. Even
Yeah.
if it's something as simple as sitting at the dining table and sharing about your day with your family. And if you want to have friends, knowing how to ask good questions, how to pay attention. Something that I know, Alex, you do really well. I just noticed that I rattled off a couple descriptors of who I am, and you nailed them in the same sequence that I mentioned them too. So just being a really good active listener, these are all things I just had to work at and learn. The
Yeah.
career happened years later, but the public speaking happened when I realized I got to open my mouth to fit in.
When you started Yale, what did you think your career path was gonna be?
Oh, I applied to Yale as a math major because that was my favorite subject. And I probably thought I'd go into teaching in a school. When I was at Yale, I realized that math was very abstract and dimensional and all of this stuff that I didn't really care about. So then I tried a whole bunch of other possible degrees. It's a liberal arts college, so you have until your third year to decide. Then I landed on economics because economics was a essentially set of frameworks of how to solve problems, and I really liked that. So I did economics, and then I thought, oh, I'm going to go into consulting because that's what most people were doing. Either they're getting recruited into the CIA or something, or they're going to consulting.
Yeah.
And so I thought, let's do consulting. And then the goal was to do an MBA. And I applied to a graduate school after working for a couple of years, and I got into an MBA program at Trinity, which is in Dublin, Ireland. So I got the two degrees and I applied to consulting companies. And as life sometimes throws at you, I graduated in a recession. Therefore, despite my best attempts at applying, despite my resume, which had Yale, Trinity, United Nations, KPMG, and a bunch of other nice things, and besides my heart, which was very pure and very determined to achieve this goal, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. But every closed door also leads you to the right open door.
And what was that door?
The open door. The one that, well, actually, it wasn't open. I had still had to turn the knob and open it.
They
It
kick it
wasn't
down.
just wide open there. But what ended up happening is, Alex, it's an interesting thing. If you don't work, you don't make money. And if you don't make money, you get poor. And when you get poor, you get desperate. When you get desperate, you get creative. And so I started doing the things that I wouldn't do. For example, I don't like crowds of people, but I started showing up at these startup events. I didn't even know what a startup was. But I started going to these startup events because that seemed to be the place where the misfits in society who dare to have a dream would pitch their ideas. I had no idea. I had seen a couple episodes of Shark Tank, but honestly had no idea what an entrepreneur was. And just started showing up there, just started showing up like music. I started going to these concerts just hoping to catch a bit of that emotion and that fire that they had because my life was going nowhere. And I must say, this was a period of 18 months, right? If it was like 2, 3 weeks, fine, you can get through it. But if it's
Right.
18 months as an immigrant in another country without a job, whew, there are no government supports, there's no government handouts, there was nothing. And so at that point, I did not know the word entrepreneur, but I realized I had to make my own money. And so it started off by singing with a choir, then playing piano with a band. And since I was anyway entertainment at an event, I would then do some of the introductions for some of the speakers that were there at the event. And then I started listening to what was the real need of these entrepreneurs. I realized that these events were the only times these entrepreneurs were getting together. And I thought, how cool if they just worked together. And that was the genesis of my first startup, first official startup, which was Treehouse, a co-working space. But it wasn't just any co-working space, it was Ireland's first co-working space. And as a result, I got some pretty cool opportunities speaking in the parliament, getting some of the hottest, biggest investors on board because nothing like this had ever existed in Ireland. And when you're doing something good for the community, especially when you're a foreigner, people pay attention. And so I started getting a lot of press, and that led to more and more opportunities, which then led to more startups. And so all through my 20s, I just built companies, but I built companies to help people like me, help ordinary people live better lives. And I'm not a technologist, and I only became an entrepreneur when the government gave me a visa called Entrepreneur Visa. But until then, I just thought I was solving problems. That would have been the title I'd give myself as problem solver. And that was the greatest gift because I didn't know I had it in me to create my own business. I didn't know I had it in me to build a personal brand. I didn't know I had it in me to even know how to work outside of a structure. Because when you're an entrepreneur, you build everything. You build your schedule for the day. You build the tools that you use on your computer.
Yep.
You build your lifestyle. You build your friends. You build everything. When you work in a job, a lot of that's given to you and expected of you.
Yeah.
And so it was the rudest, greatest lesson to growing up or season to growing up. It was amazing, and I'm so grateful for it.
Your motto, start now, start simple, has resonated with a lot of people. What's one moment in your life when this mantra completely changed the trajectory of your career?
The trajectory of my career. That's an interesting question. So, yeah, I'll tell you. I had finished building a bunch of businesses and I'd sort of retired, unsure what to do next in my life. And a friend of mine said that he was hosting a rather small conference, about 1,000 people, and he asked if I would host one of the smaller stages, the startup stage. And I told him quite honestly that I didn't know how to do that. I don't know what hosting meant. And he's given me the only training for what has now become my 8-year career. And he said, introduce speakers and engage the audience. That was it. And so I showed up, and as always, I practiced very hard. And so I had a list of founders' names, and because I didn't go to a school for it, and because I didn't get a certification in it, I just sort of made it up. I decided that rather than introducing the LinkedIn bios, I would introduce kind of what made them unique, what made them special. And what I realized is people actually started sticking around because these were human personal connections rather than LinkedIn bios being read out. I also decided that rather than reading the script given, I was going to learn the script and I was actually going to be their friend. I was going to meet them backstage and introduce them like they were my buddies. And so I started doing these really, really tiny, honestly, very, very seemingly inconsequential things. I mean, what's the big deal between memorizing versus reading or introducing a friend, supposedly, than a contact? Nothing, right, Alex? Except it was everything. Because when I was on that stage, this German lady walks by and she goes, "Hey, Dan, love your energy. You're crazy. You're good. I love what you're doing. I'm going to call you this evening. And because she's German, she literally called me that same evening. In Ireland, we don't really do it. When we say call you this evening, that means like in the next 6 months, let's figure something out. And she called me that very evening and she said, "Hey, we're doing a small event in Munich. Could you fly over in February? And and you could host this event." And I thought, oh my gosh, this is like the deal of a lifetime. I'm getting flown to Munich? What? And then she emailed me a week later saying, "Oh, I'm sorry to have disappointed you. Uh, I guess it's not a good fit." And I said, "What happened?" And she said, "I didn't get your offer." I said, "Oh, no." I said, "Yes." She said, "Yeah, but I want your offer." I said, "My offer is yes." And she says, "No, like your offer, how much do we pay you?" Pay me? What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
what the hell
Pay
are you
me?
talking about?
I was just doing all this stuff voluntarily. Like I was doing this stuff in youth groups and
Yeah,
choirs and at
of
these
course.
events. It's like, what are you talking about paying me? And I
Yeah.
said, "Oh no, if you just cover my flight, that'll be fine." She's like, "Oh no, flight and hotel is covered. We're going to pay you on top of that." I so appreciate German culture for that. They stick to rules, and that's amazing. And so I flew over to again, not a big deal event, Alex, except at that event was a billionaire and the richest shareholder of BMW. And she was in the audience, and she didn't make herself seen or heard. And she sent a word to someone, and that someone messaged me foolishly on Facebook. Now, the problem with Facebook is I don't check Facebook. And the other problem with Facebook is if they're not your friend, it shows up in your spam.
Mm.
So 2 months goes away, and then I happen to go through spam for some reason before I hit delete, and I see this message saying, "Sir Richard Branson wants to meet you." And I thought, yeah, I have seen every single spoof subject line in my life, and that is as spoof as it gets. But out of curiosity, I opened it, and he claimed something that seemed not so spammy. He said that a certain person who had attended this event suggested that I would be the right person to do such an interview with Sir Richard Branson. And I thought, okay, that's too many personal things that he knows. So let me give it a go. And I did. And here's another small thing that happened, Alex. Start now, start simple, right? When I went there, I picked a really good outfit because it's a big deal. But when I showed up at the event, they said, "Hey, we have this thing that we do where we wear the Bavarian German outfit called a Lederhosen. It's a leather trousers
Mm.
with checkered shirt, very unflattering outfit." And he said, "Would you be willing to wear it?"
Oh,
Now,
okay.
the other
Not
speakers did
expecting
not
that.
wear it,
Yeah.
but I thought, I've got nothing to lose. Let me go for it. So I put it on, Alex. And here's the crazy part. Look, notice all the very seemingly inconsequential things that lead from one to another. But what ended up happening was I'm wearing this lederhosen with a red shirt. If you're in Germany, you know that it comes in red and blue, occasionally green. But it's a very traditional, standard outfit. Nothing special about it, except it was special on me. Brown guy wearing a lederhosen. I'm on stage doing my thing. And at one point, the final keynote, Sir Richard Branson, the legend. I noticed at the end of the interview that he does something very strange. He taps his leg, hits his leg. Now we've been sitting for about an hour, and I think to myself, I think I know what he's doing. I think his leg's falling asleep. You know that thing that you get when it's like
Mhm.
ants in your
Yeah,
leg and
like a
you
little
can't.
iggly. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And it was just note at the beginning, I said that I'm an introvert and I spend a lot of time observing people. Well, it happens even to this day. I pay keen attention to people. It's a small thing, but he just tapped himself. I mean, there's 5,000 Germans in front of us. So our main attention was entertaining the masses. But I just saw this little thing tap, tap, and I thought, I think his leg is dead. So the end, when they say, "Sir Richard Branson," he stands up and he sits back down. He just keeps waving. And I go, I think he can't stand up. So I go up to him and I put my arm around him and I just lift him up. And he immediately realizes that I'm supporting him, but I'm not lifting up like he's an old, crippled man. I'm lifting up like he's a champion because I lift him with one hand and I pump my fist in the air and he pumps his fist in the air. We walk out like we are best buddies, except I am literally carrying him on my body across the stage. But what the journalist, I take a photo of this. And Sir Richard Branson, because he's a legend, he also wears a lederhosen. He also wears a red outfit. And so from then on, they just assume that Richard and I are good friends, that we color coordinated, wore the same outfit to the same event, and walked out hand in hand. That photo goes around Germany, and my career takes off like crazy. And so, the Start Now, Start Simple philosophy has happened many times in my life, whether it was as a 12-year-old organizing my first anti-Halloween party, a story that I don't have time to go into, or whether it was how I eventually became an advisor to the Irish national government through a voluntary role, speaking to some 12-year-old girls in a classroom, to this career as a speaker. It was just saying yes to a friend who said if I can do a small stage at a small event, that small event now has become Web Summit, one of the biggest events in the world. But at that point, it was 1,000 people, and I was on a side stage. But you honor the little opportunities. You do things a little bit different. You own what you do. You put in the work, and you pay attention to the details, and you really show up 100% to whatever it is. Literally start now, start simple. At no point did I say that I bought an expensive outfit. At no point did I say that I went and got speech training. At no point did I say that I went and got a degree in communication. At no point did I say that I waited until I had time to take on the opportunity. I just said yes to the little step, 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 step. And literally within 3 steps, I went from volunteering on a side stage at a small event in Dublin to hosting an event with Sir Richard Branson in front of 5,000 Germans paid to do so.
Hey,
And
yeah.
now, yeah.
A lot
So
of
it's a
change
wild
in
journey, man.
a lot of change in there, and obviously adaptability is a game changer. What's one thing you think people get wrong when dealing with change, and how can they flip that script?
That's such a great question, Alex. I love that. I would say the greatest thing that you can get wrong is not believing that you're capable of it. The number of times I hear people say, I couldn't, or I can't, or not me, and they disqualify themselves. I think that's the biggest issue is the negative talk that you say
To yourself.
to yourself.
Yeah.
And the best way to flip the switch is to say yes and to believe in yourself. I think too often we're looking for validation and affirmation from people outside, when actually the real problem is ourselves. We need to wake up and say, "Yeah, I got this. I can do it. One baby step today. Not the whole transformation today, just one baby step." So for 2025, I have a big goal to lose 20 kilos. I don't know how much that is in pounds, but it's a lot of weight. I
Yeah.
think it's almost 40 pounds.
Yeah, something like that.
Now, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen by some magic pill, although I have to check out this Ozempic thing. It's not going to happen by eating one healthy meal. It's going to happen little by little. But you know what the hardest part is, Alex? It's me believing I can do it because it's not the first time I've tried to lose weight. It's
Yes.
not even the second time I've tried to lose weight. I have experience failing myself. So the hardest part is me telling myself, no, 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 no. Forgive yourself, move forward because this time you can. No one else is telling me I can't do it. No one else is saying, haha, you're in the gym. It's me thinking, what's the big deal? Why go to the gym today? You worked hard. Just stay home, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
and I'd say for a lot of people, the biggest struggle is ourselves. We are the greatest setback to ourselves, is us.
So you've coached countless people, man. What's the most common mistake people make when they try to grow, and how do you help them overcome it?
Not having clarity. I believe that the greatest gift I can give people as a coach is creating a path where there seems to be a lot of confusion and having clarity where there seems to be a lot of confusion. And what I mean by that is it is wonderful to have dreams. Please have them. It is great to have a vision board. Please draw one up. It's even good to have a to-do list. But none of that will happen. None of those dreams or visions will become reality unless you have a strategy that you can action every day. Action is the key word, not dream about it. Not vision it, action it every day. And I think the reason people get stuck on the dream is because they don't know what to do next. So it's sometimes easier to just dream than to develop an
Yeah.
action plan or a habit. So I'd say that's the biggest challenge is people come with dreams, but they don't have a strategy, and that's okay. That's why I'm there. And we make a path, we make a plan, we make the steps, and then they just have to put in the work and action it. The
Dan,
process always leads to the product.
Dan, last question for you, man. How do you want to be remembered?
Hmm. Easy. I have one simple mission in life. That's to help people start now, start simple. And I love seeing people win. So I hope my funeral is full of people that are living their best lives, that have radically transformed their lives because they had an encounter or a moment. And that's how I want to be remembered. I want to be remembered for how their lives were changed and transformed. That's the greatest blessing for me is to see people around me win.
That's an incredible way to want to be remembered, man. Thanks for sharing. Where can we connect with you on socials? Where can we find your best work?
Just Google Dan Ram or ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT also has a pretty good sense of who I am. And so look up Dan Ram. I will also warn you that I don't have bots and I don't hire staff to respond to people, but you will get a response, and that response is really from me. I think people are surprised when they DM me that I respond, but it's because I honestly feel that social media is supposed to be conversation. It's not supposed to be a promotional page. So you won't see me selling things or hawking things or asking you to give your money to my crypto plan. None of that happens on my social media. My social media is hopefully to inspire, to instigate change. And in that, I hope that you will reach out and be like, hey, step two was doing this. I don't know how that applies. Could you help me out? And I will respond to you. So if you are eager to see some kind of transformation or change in your life, reach out. I'll respond.
All right, y'all, you heard it. If you found value in this episode, please make sure to share it with someone you know is going to find value in it. If you want to go to any specific part of the conversation or any of the resources that we mentioned, you could go on the show notes page of whatever platform you're listening on, or you go to hustleinspireshustle.com/podcast and find the episode with Dan Ram. Until next time, it's Alex Quin, Dan Ram, Hustle Inspires Hustle. Catch you on the next one. Bye.